We have a great show today. I'm really excited. We got Jana Fuelberth in here, CEO of Analytically. Really exciting business. You had the luxury of taking money, doing the raise.
Right.
I am positive and negative depending on the week on raising capital for businesses, right? And it's and I think you probably are with me depending on what.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about the psychology. You know, there's a lot of reasons that technology companies raise money for going to market. A couple reasons. It's you're usually trying to create a big value, right? You're usually trying to. Technology is not cheap to build,
right?
The average developer, and even in Indiana, is probably $90,000 to $120,000 a year, right? So even though we're in a great market for that, Indiana's got a low cost of living. It's still expensive,
Right. Yeah.
And you need 4 or 5, usually working on the front of the product, and 4 or 5 working on the back of the product, right? So one of the things that you did is you're out there and you've raised capital for your business. How did that change the game?
Great question. So when we actually took the proceeds of our first business and rolled them into Analytically. So that was the great part. We kind of had a nest egg to begin with.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to building software, you're right, it's expensive. I mean, it really is. It's expensive to build. It's expensive to create a brand. It's expensive to get your name out there.
Yep.
And analytics, I would say, is probably the most expensive business.
And we talked about earlier how data analytics is one of the highest funded spaces right now.
It is.
Because there's this concept that data is the new currency.
Right.
And so you're in a big boy club.
Right.
And you're taking.
And you can't do it cheap. You can't do it cheap. So one of the things that we did, so workforce analytics for us is helping businesses and organizations be more productive, more profitable, more efficient, and have higher quality. And we believe by doing those 4 things, it also boosts employee engagement. It also boosts work experience.
Yeah.
So because you can actually see where you're having poor employee engagement based on the numbers. There are symptomatic things that happen throughout an organization.
Totally agree.
Where like if you're actually crushing it and having high quality, I actually look for poor employee engagement there, because are you burning anybody out? So we are not a people analytics business, though part of our data set's HR. We're a workforce analytics business. And so with that, we actually went the route, since we had a little bit of a nest egg to roll into the business as well. We went the route, and I have founders look at me like, of angels. So
Yes.
we went the angel route.
Yep.
We didn't do the traditional
Friends,
VC,
family, and fools.
right? So what we've done, right? What we've done is we've actually looked at the verticals that we sell the most into, or that we have most application. So that's manufacturing, distribution, it's healthcare, it's services, it's retail, it's hospitality, it's heavy operationally intensive businesses. And we found angels in those businesses that I call my titans.
Yep.
They are titans of industry who then not only bring their capital, but then they also bring their know-how and their network.
Yep.
So they can instantly see, and so many of them, I've been like 3 sentences in to explain what we do, and they're like,
oh, they completed it for you.
I wish I had this,
Yep.
I wish that I had this when.
I think that's the definition of what I would call smart money.
Right.
Because there is a difference between smart money and I wouldn't call it dumb money, but there's the opposite of smart money, right?
Net neutral money.
Yes.
It's just capital.
When we did our first raise for our epic failure in my first tech startup, and I say epic failure because the business wasn't successful, although we were bleeding edge on multiple different things, and our CEO to this date, I spent many of the last 15 years thinking that we had something that wasn't very smart, and then I watched Google do local, and I watched how this thing changed the way we do business, and I'm thinking, man, we were really on some cutting edge stuff.
Right.
But one of the dumbest
and your failures make you more credible.
Well, yes, and I mean, I wouldn't give it up for the world, right? I mean, it was at least worth 3 MBAs, right? But one of the most important things that we didn't do is he had a financial planning background, and we raised money from people who really could not make any impact in the business.
Great point.
And we took 60 checks that were 25 to $50,000 to $150,000, and I remember thinking to myself, no one here really understands what this business is trying to do, right? And we were in the middle of Anderson, Indiana, trying to be a bleeding edge tech startup, which was, I do think you can be geographically undesirable. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we weren't that too. So I think those were critical mistakes we made. And so as you're really choosing partners when you're choosing investors, right? And that's different than your business, right? Because your relationship with capital is much different than hers, right? So talk to us about how you use money.
Well, we use money purely for acquisitions, right? And we look for very passive investors, not somebody that's typically we're not looking for somebody to have a piece of our business,
right?
We're looking for investors that are looking for alternative places to put their money,
right?
So they have two options: they can invest and just be a lender, for us, or they can own an asset, and purchase a property that's already performing,
right?
So there's a couple different ways, but it's a lot different than raising money for a tech company.
It's crazily different, right?
It's way different.
And so
well, and I think another difference is like people that invest in tech like to dream.
Yeah.
Oh, this thing's going to explode. I'm going to invest $100 grand. I could get $5 million back. All that. Where it's us is like, we're going to pay you a steady 10% return. And you're like, man, that's boring.
Yeah.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Is it boring?
Well, it's a different type of investor, right? It's a different type of. It's different money.
Well, it's a different mindset because it's a different part of their portfolio.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah. Well, you might be dealing with the same type of person, to your point.
Yeah.
Who's got money, more high risk with the technology investment and more steady Eddie with the real estate investment. And it's interesting. It's just having that conversation around money. Is how has your guys' relationship with money changed as your businesses have evolved? Like how has that changed?
It's so funny that there'll be times where we'll be really investing in the business, and I will feel, and then I'll do my personal finances, and I'll be like, I look really prudent this month, because you just feel like you're really investing, you're really investing. And so I look at money when it comes to my business as how can we propel, how can we move faster, how can we have a bigger impact. I look at the checks in as impact fuel.
I mean, mine has changed. For our businesses, we have to take on a lot of risk, and it's personal. It's personal risk. And the key for us is how do we transition personal from business, and how do we keep the business money separate from the personal? And you take on real estate's a highly leverageable asset, which is great. You can use OPM, but there's a personal guarantee that comes with that. So how do we get our business in a position where that personal guarantee is off me personally and on the business?
Not so personal.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do when you deal with houses.
Right. I'm just even thinking about like how the decimals move. Like how it used to be a $10,000 problem was a big problem.
Right.
And now we're I'm working on a $30,000 problem a month, right? Where we bought a business that was $2 million. Now we're looking at ones that are 3 and 4. And I think it's how the numbers have just changed.
Yeah.
The decimals have moved, but
it's the same effort.
Yeah.
It's just think bigger.
Yeah.
Think bigger.
And then surrounding yourself where those decimal places, or with people where those decimal places are like a rounding error to them.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you think about thinking bigger, or when we talk about thinking bigger, it's also who's your community, where they're saying that next decimal place. That was like I was sitting with one of our advisors the other day, and he's a brilliant guy, and he looks at me and he goes, "You know what, Jana? Opening up a new country from like a sales territory perspective," he goes, "it's kind of hard." And I just lost it. Because I'm like, that's who I want to hang out with. Yeah. That's who I want to be around. Someone who says, a whole new country, we're like, oh my gosh, think about launching a new, region of the United States.
I just interviewed a guy who speaks Mandarin, and he's done and opened multiple multiple divisions of businesses in China.
Right.
And I'm like, we really don't have I don't think we have a role for him, but I was just like, God, man, I just want to pick your brain.
Right. You just want to be around those people.
Like, how the hell did you do that, right? I think with every entrepreneur and every business person, owner, we have this relationship with what is possible and what is not possible. And you know, I'm a big fan of David Goggins. I don't know if you've ever read that book, You Can't Hurt Me. But his concept of that we are capable, and when we get to what we think is the end of our capacity, we're only 40% of our total capacity.
Agreed.
And I think the reason why money is such a great way to measure that is because it's palpable, right? It's numeric, right? So I think when we think that we weren't able to go through a problem, or we were able to hit a number, I can remember, like, I had my coach tell me this like several times. It's like, and this is way personal, but my dad never had a business over $2 million in revenue, and I struggled against that number for years in 3 different businesses. And then when I finally just dealt with that, we blew by it in like months.
Right.
And it was so crazy to me. It's like, man, you never know where that head trash comes from, right? But I do think a lot of times what we have to do as entrepreneurs is deal with mom and dad's version of money.
Yeah.
And how I can remember having this very frank conversation with my mom when she was coming to my house, and she said, I can't believe I raised a son that has someone clean his house and someone mow his lawn. And I said, Mom, those people make $30 an hour and I make $350. I mean, like, let's put and she was an accountant. And I never got that. I never got that argument ever again. But I think there's some of that we all deal with. That, and it goes back to the circle, right? Is being around those people that are accomplishing things with other decimal points in them, and you see that they put their pants on just like you do. They have quirks that they do. They maybe had too much to drink at the Christmas party just like you do. Yeah. Right. I think that's what part of what happens, right? Talk to me about, like, as you have gone up and dealt with people that are further up in the monetary standpoint, how does that change your perception?
Well, you do realize that they are just humans.
Yep.
They are. My grandfather was president of Speedway Bank, and one of the things that he always said is everyone puts their pants on the same way. And so it's funny that you bring that up. But so I grew up in Peoria, Illinois. Everyone works for Caterpillar. Both of my parents are really wise, very very conservative and practical. My dad grew up on a farm in rural Nebraska.
No, Nebraska. Wow.
Nebraska.
Yep.
And so I've had to deal with what you're talking about quite a bit, where there's a difference between being prudent and there's a difference between starving your business.
Yep.
And so then I start sitting on my board and I start getting these advisors, and one of the first things that they tell me is, like, you need to quit worrying about money. Now, I say that really carefully because...
And then the other side of your body goes like this.
Well, because not everyone needs that advice.
Yeah.
I needed that advice in that moment. So this goes back to one of my tenets, which is, like, choose who you take advice from.
Yep.
Because he knew me, he knew my business, and he, like, fully invested in the future of analytically. And so he's like, you've got to start spending real money.
So... on the other side of that, there's the guys who are the deal guys, who can always sell their way out of problems, right?
Right.
So talk to me how you've had to learn discipline on that money side, but yet still invest in the business at the same time.
Well, yeah, when you're a deal guy, not every deal's a deal. Even though, and that was the hardest thing that I've had to learn over the last 5 years is sometimes you just got to say no. And, and then also, like, act like you don't need it. Money, to your point, like, don't worry about the money. Even though in the back of your brain you're like, yeah, easy for you to say when you got payroll coming, on Friday.
Right.
So when you're having those conversations with investors, it's more of a passive conversation.
Yeah, there should be a badge as an entrepreneur, like, have you had to meet payroll, right?
Right.
There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
I totally think there's a lot of truth to that.
Right.
And I think that's where the skill set of a deal guy comes into play. Like, when you have to get in the weeds to meet your obligations so your employees can feed their families, like, you have to figure that out.
Yep.
And so I think that's a big transition as you get into small business, of realizing that it's not about you anymore.
Yep.
And so when you're able to talk to potential investors about your actual core business, they invest in you, in the business.
Yep.
You know, and so getting very clear on that aspect of
Yeah.
the money side, you know, I think the money takes care of itself.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of this, and I continue to put my foot in both canoes. Right, where one is raising money for a new play. Right,
Right.
we've in the I guess 9 teams that I've been a part of or even a founder of. We've raised $27 million, and the best deals came from the deals where we had co-created with the client the value prop, much like
Right,
you did.
right.
And the worst exits were the ones where we went down and we raised the money on a problem we thought we were out there to solve.
Got it.
And yet as I still my kids, as I call them, my kids are still out there. 6 of them are still going. We
Yeah.
don't know which one's going to grow up and be the biggest or the
Right.
most successful, right? Where they're still going. And it's funny. Like I've seen like one of these companies has died twice and
Yeah.
resuscitated itself because it was so, the problem they were trying to solve was so big and so pertinent, and they invested a lot of money in technology and a lot of money to solve some problems. That it's so funny that a VC at this stage of the game is talking about coming in, right? And then I've seen a company that had one of my good friends, Brian Rowe, who started with a value over here that has evolved that three times to serve a completely different business than what people originally put in. But it's the veracity of that team
Right.
to stay focused. And I think there's components of, you got to have the passion for the problem, and you've got to be empathetic. But one of the things you guys have done, and I think a lot of people do, is let's talk about protecting the sanctity of the team. Like the team to me is one of the things that you guys are doing well. The team is one of the things you're building right now. Like how do you evolve and balance that customer and team kind of conversation to wonder when at some point in time the customer is wrong, right? And talk to me. Have you ever had a conflict there where you've like, wow, we have to choose between team and customer at this point,
Right. Oh, all the time.
right?
When you're building technology, there are times where even in your product roadmap, even sprint by sprint, you have to choose team or customer.
Right.
There's always that trade-off when you're doing sprint planning even. But then when it comes to, I think back to my payroll days, and we had some customers that didn't treat our teams very well. And were rude and tough on them. There's still customers today where, especially when it comes to data and analytics, the thing that we hear the most when people are implementing an analytics solution is, my data's wrong. And inevitably, you have to kind of walk them back slowly to show why the data is the way that it is. Because it could be, like you said earlier, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
It could be that they were using a calculation that actually wasn't the right calculation.
Right.
And so when it comes to like the sanctity of the team, I think honestly that is one of my roles as the team continues to grow, is to be that backstop,
Yeah.
that safety net. So
Well,
when we do charge into tough
part of that I
situations.
see you guys too is like the client can start to have you do their job, the stuff
Sure.
that they were supposed to do in this
Sure.
deal, right? Instead of like I know that there's you want to be a tech enabled service, but at what point do you stop doing? Because your profitability on that client is not like
Right.
I know you've seen that on deals, right? At what point, like especially when you're doing on the buy side, right? You're trying to get these deals for your people, but you're also trying to make sure there's enough margin in there to.
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you deal with that on day to day?
Well, I think it comes down to knowing your numbers very, very, very well. And when and just setting the precedent, like, listen, this may work for you, it may not. We're here
Not
to,
being attached.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we it's also letting them know, listen, though we're here to serve you and serve you very well, you're not the only person we're going to be talking to today.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's at some point, like to me, it goes team, than the customer. The team is more important than the customer, and the team needs to feel that. Now, there are
How
points.
long ago? I mean, for how long was it? Customers always right.
Oh,
Right.
I mean, I got my first 3 companies, I would say, where I
And then the
would,
customer controls your company and
Yeah.
every decision you make.
There's a scarcity mentality.
Yep.
There's an attachment mentality.
Yep. I can remember to this day my first digital marketing firm taking work on vacation to Mexico and then going on to pay on. This was like 15, 20 years ago. I can remember paying to get an internet,
Internet cafe. Yeah.
right? I went to an internet cafe to get a dial-up access to pray to God that I didn't get an email, even though I told this guy that I was going to be on vacation for 10 days. My family wanted to kill me, right? But I was so scared. I was so, and I remember, like, I probably, anytime anybody said anything that was somewhat negative through an email, I would be up my team's what. And it's a mind shift. It's a true mind shift. I think it's one thing to work for a company and to make your employees first when it's not your money making payroll. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to truly understand that in your business. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that I think that's a hard, like, you almost have to live the negative result of losing a key employee from that mentality before you really realize that man, I'm the problem here. I know I did. I mean, that was like, whoa, man. That's what their view of me was. I need to really kind of check myself.
Right.
And I think it's easy to do. I know from coaching other organizations, it's a lot easier for people to say that when they haven't had to make payroll.
Yep.
I will tell you that. And so when it's not their money, it's easier to. But when I've seen guys that were great leaders in Fortune 500 companies, tremendous human beings, go out and build a virtual company and beat the hell out of everybody on that team. It's like they forgot who they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of that whole 3-year, 4-year learning curve that you go through when you first start your first thing.
Right.
Is that fair?
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
So, all right, guys, we want to give these guys one last thing to think about for the day. What was the best breakthrough you had out of all this conversation, or what was the smartest thing we talked about today? If you had to pin it down.
I mean, I think it's just totally reinforcing how you show up.
Yeah.
I mean, breakthrough, or let's just call it a habit. Mm-hmm. How you show up matters, and really thinking about the way that, when I leave you two, or when you have a meeting, did you make it a get to or a have to meeting? Mm-hmm. So that was my big point today.
Well, it's a whole nother subject we need to riff on, is how to run a meeting, man. Because that's my pet peeve, dude. Is like, people think death by meeting because they run crappy meetings.
Did you get my SEO from this weekend? Is that why? Yeah. But
No.
I was studying it this weekend because I think that even if you've ran good meetings and had that habit, you have to constantly be a student of it.
Refine, define. Mm-hmm. How about you?
I think we hit on a really good subject of team before customer.
Man.
And you don't ever think about that.
Yeah.
You don't ever think about
Well,
that.
there's a great book out there called $1 Trillion Coach.
Oh, I love it.
Right?
Oh,
my God.
what a great book.
Brilliant. And so much about the team that was written after he died. I can't say that word. I know someone can. Yeah. But possibly, whatever. So you know what I mean? Yeah. It's an awful word. I can't say it. So but he was so much of. I mean, they're attributing $1 trillion of value between Apple and Facebook,
if not more.
Right.
If not more.
And because his whole premise was protect the sanctity of the team. Mm-hmm. And what I was thinking about with you guys is like Sony started making rice cookers, but he chose the team first. Mm-hmm. They evolved into electronics because they protected the team. Right? You guys started in payroll and moved into data analytics. What the fuck? Who would have thought, right? Yeah. I started in the restaurant business and I got into tech. How the heck did that happen? Mm-hmm. Right? You were in banking, right? And now you're in real estate. I think it's like when you value and protect the team, then they will deliver value to the customers. And I got a very, very good lesson by my first manager, my first owner, the guy who taught me the restaurant business. I mean, I call it, we had the the FU talk where he was going to fire me if I didn't make this change. And it was basically my first lesson in leadership. And he was like, look, you run around and you try to outserve everybody. You try to take care of 250 guests because you were a good server. I said, he goes, if you just took care of the 20 servers that were in here, they would take care of the guests. And it was a paradigm shift for me, right? It was just like, whoa. I never even thought of it that way. I thought it was my job to have the best skills. And I find myself doing that a lot, just really going back to that first premise with our team. It's like, dude, take care of the frontline people. It's the internal customers first that take care of the external customers.
Right.
We got to serve them. And that is one thing that's just over and over and over come back. I think to you too, it's like, I agree, your show up. I mean, that's how you show up and how you take care of the team is everything. But part of that is the rituals you use to get yourself in this state, right?
Yeah.
What are you putting in your head?
Yep.
How are you taking care of your body? What are you eating? I mean, those are important decisions we got to make every day
Every single day.
to be that person we want, because you got to have that energy. It takes a lot of energy not to let your croc brain take over your, and just on somebody when they made a mistake, right?
Yep.
I mean that's like, I don't know about you guys, but there's been moments where I've had to say, I'm not ready to respond. I need to shut up, and I need to,
Great self-awareness, yeah.
Because I've shown up and did it the wrong way enough.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think those are three great things for everybody. I mean, good show, guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely,
Yeah. Nice to
absolutely.
meet you.
Nice to meet
Thank
you
you very
too.
much.
Yeah.